Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. This is my review for Hawkeye. I have no idea if it's a season 1 or if it's a limited series. I think it's the latter, but whatever the case, it came out on Disney Plus last year around the holidays. And I actually wanted to try to review this after it aired because it's considered a Christmas show. But by the time the finale finally aired, it was only 3 days until Christmas, and I had so much to do in terms of work and screeners, so I just didn't have the time to review Hawkeye. And I thought, you know what? I'll review it in the next year. Well, it's the next year, and here's my review. The series takes place 1 year after the events of Avengers Endgame, and that movie took place in 2023, so next year. That means this series is going to take place 2 years from now. Anyway, Clint Barton is trying to reconnect with his family. He ends up in New York City with his kids to see the musical Rogers, but things start happening involving his past as Ronin. The Tracksuit Mafia is after him because their boss, Maya Lopez, her father was killed by Ronin during the events between Infinity War and Endgame, during that 5-year post-snap gap. So she's pretty much after Clint for revenge, not to mention there's somebody that she works for behind the scenes. And things don't get any easier when a young archer named Kate Bishop gets entangled in this let's just say fiasco because she wears the Ronin suit for a brief period of time. So pretty much it's a race against the clock for Clint Barton to A, find out what's going on, B, figure out who's behind it all besides Maya Lopez, and C, get back to his ranch in time for Christmas. So this is the last MCU Disney Plus show of 2021. I've been falling a bit behind on these TV show reviews, like I haven't reviewed Ms. Marvel and or She-Hulk, but I figured to make Hawkeye a priority because it's Christmas time, and this is considered a Christmas show, much in the same way that in the MCU, Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie, and there's a Christmas special that I will be reviewing tomorrow. But anyway, Hawkeye. I was pretty excited for this series because Clint Barton never really got his fair due. He got more character development in Age of Ultron than I thought he did in the first Avengers film, where he was pretty much under mind control. He didn't show up at all in Infinity War for reasons, and in Endgame he didn't do a whole lot either. I think Jeremy Renner has been a great casting choice for this character, and he pretty much nails this role, but this is the first time where he's really given the spotlight. He's given a lot to do, and he's just as good as ever. The show primarily focuses on the aftermath of his time as Ronin, the consequences of pretty much going on a mad killing spree because his family got snapped away, and you get the sense of how good of a father and how loyal of a husband he is. All the trailers for the show excluded Linda Cardellini as Laura Barton, and I assumed that they got divorced. They split up between Endgame and this show. But no, she's just at home. She's taking care of the kids after Clint sends them back from New York so he can take care of this problem. And it turns out that Laura has some secrets of her own that I'm sure we'll get some explanations for in the future. So it was definitely good to see a more human side to Clint Barton, and the action scenes are still pretty spectacular. Not only do we get to see a lot of cool archery tricks from Clint, but also Hailee Steinfeld, who plays Kate Bishop. And this is just perfect casting already. I've always been excited to see Kate Bishop finally join the MCU, and I think nobody could have played this character better than Hailee Steinfeld. She comes in as a mega fan of Hawkeye. The opening of the show is pretty much her origin story, how she's inspired by Clint, how she trains her whole life to be an archer, and she's just a really charming character. You can definitely tell that there's a full-blown fangirl side of her when she meets Clint for the first time, but as the series progresses, she learns to kind of look at him not just as this idol, but just as another guy, and their dynamic works really well. The action scenes, as I said, are spectacular, especially the one in the car. That's one long take in episode 3. That is such a mind-blowing scene. And episode 6 is pretty fun as well. We get to see a lot of cool trick arrows. In terms of MCU Disney Plus shows, I don't think the action is as good as with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Moon Knight, but there's still some creativity put into these sequences. So those are our two heroes. As for the villains, we get quite a handful of them, and the one villain that actually gets the most development is Alaqua Cox as Maya Lopez. Alaqua Cox has never been in an acting role beforehand, so this was her first debut. I don't know anything about Maya Lopez in the comics, outside of her being deaf, her being a Native American superhero, and the fact that her superhero name is Echo. So I'm just judging this character based off this series, and I think Alaqua Cox does a really good job, especially for not being an actress prior to Hawkeye. In the beginning of episode 3, you get a full sense of her background, why she's after Clint Barton, and as the series goes on, she proves to be a very menacing threat. There's tension whenever she's on screen, or whenever you just can tell she's nearby. But when we get to the ending of episode 5, and Clint pretty much confronts Maya Lopez about what happened during that 5-year gap and why her father was killed, she starts to be suspicious about the people she's working with and for, especially when it comes to her boss. And who is her boss, you might say? Well, it's none other than Kingpin himself, Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio from the Netflix Daredevil series. When the big Kingpin reveal at the end of episode 5 came out, I don't think it was at all a coincidence that it just happened 2 days before Spider-Man No Way Home came out, which featured one scene with Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock. That had to be something Marvel planned strategically out. Or maybe it was just a funny coincidence since Spider-Man No Way Home wasn't supposed to come out in December because the pandemic pushed everything back. If it was a coincidence, it was one hell of a coincidence. So yeah, Maya Lopez soon has a change of heart, is against the tracksuit mafia, and Kingpin is the one who's pretty much the big boss running everything. And this is where some of the problems come in. This is something that Marvel has been pretty guilty for a couple of their Disney Plus series, like WandaVision, Loki, Hawkeye, and to a certain extent, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. If you've been watching those series, you know that they do this thing where they keep the villain a secret. We don't know who's doing everything behind the scenes, and that reveal doesn't usually happen until the final episode. And in the case of both Loki and Hawkeye, it's kind of a hindrance towards those shows because they're only 6 episodes long. So it just feels pretty last minute to introduce these very important characters, like He Who Must Remain in Loki and Kingpin and Hawkeye. And I know Marvel is planning to bring back these actors and characters again. Vincent D'Onofrio will be back in Daredevil Born Again, and I think he's going to be in Echo. And as for He Who Must Remain, that's just a Kang variant who we're going to see in Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania in a couple months. But in terms of the shows themselves, just having them be self-contained as much as they can be in the MCU, these last-minute reveals just don't work. It worked the best with Agatha in WandaVision because that series was 9 episodes rather than 6. Another element of the show that I felt was really rushed was Yelena's involvement. Florence Pugh returns as Yelena from Black Widow, and if you saw the stinger for Black Widow, then you know that she was given orders by Valentina to kill Hawkeye, pretty much as revenge for killing Natasha. At least that's the narrative that Yelena's given. I don't know what Valentina's true motives for wanting Hawkeye dead are, but we'll find out at some point, I'm assuming. And the reveal of this character in the series comes in at the end of episode 4. We get to see what she's been doing post-Black Widow in the beginning of episode 5, and she does have good chemistry with Kate Bishop, but she really doesn't get into the action until episode 6. She has a brief scuffle with Clint at the end of episode 4, but she doesn't do much until the finale. And it's wrapped up in a very quick and sloppy manner, to where it's disappointing. The actual conclusion was probably the best way they could have wrapped up this segment, knowing that yeah, Clint loved Natasha and looked at her as a best friend and sister in the same way that she was Yelena's sister. I get that. I get having that specific conclusion, but to have it wrap up so quickly was very disappointing. As for some other things worth noting in terms of your actors, Vera Farmiga is in it as Kate Bishop's mother. She's good. Tony Dalton from Better Call Saul is the boyfriend of Vera Farmiga's character, and he's fun. He's really good for the little time that he's on, but he's not really given a whole lot. Fra Fee, as Maya Lopez's second in command, I thought was pretty bad. Overall, despite the complaints I have with this series, I mostly enjoyed it. I feel like there are a few things that they did butcher in the finale, like wrapping up Elena's revenge story so quickly, having Kingpin just pop up, ultimately do very little, and get shot by Maya Lopez, even though I know that's a frame in the comics and we know this character's coming back eventually. It's just, I don't know. The finale could have been a lot better plot-wise, considering that it's the longest of the Disney Plus MCU finales. But the actual ending, where Clint Barton finally goes home to his family, brings Kate Bishop along, and burns the Ronin suit, I liked it. Ultimately, this series is good, but it's not great. I haven't had the time to actually sit down and rewatch it for the holidays, mainly because the holidays are such an incredibly busy time for me that it's hard to actually sit down and watch some of the Christmas stuff that I usually like to watch during this time. But I would like to revisit this series at some point and hopefully make it a Christmas tradition. Not my favorite of these Disney Plus MCU shows, and I think after Peacemaker, they can definitely amp up the number of episodes from 6 to 8. But it's still a fun time regardless. And there you go, that's my review for Hawkeye. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I want to know what you guys think about the series. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. You can also like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day, and take care of yourselves.